Today we're going over Chapter 4 for stress management for exercise science and sports medicine students. I'm trying to share the screen. And here we go. Computer froze up, hold on. I don't know why it does this on this computer. This happened the last 2 days. Anyways, see if we can get it going again. All right, is sick, so to speak, our body will get sick. If our mind is healthy, our body can be healthy, vice versa. When you feel sick physically, it can make you feel sick emotionally as well, or intellectually. It can affect all those realms. Okay, and so again, understanding, like we talked about the 5 components of fitness, if any one of those is in a extreme stress mode in a negative way, it will affect the other aspects. Okay, and so understanding how the mind affects the body and the body affects the mind can help you to also understand that sometimes when stuff's going on mentally, sometimes doing positive things physically can also have a positive effect on your mind. Right? That's what, us being exercise fitness majors, we tell people that all the time. Hey, I'm stressed. What's something you do? Me personally, a lot of times when I'm really stressed, I go for a run. Again, some people are like, actually running would probably stress me out more. It might. But other people, it makes them feel better. A lot of folks maybe have punching bags. You put on your boxing gloves, you go out and hit the bag, helps you to de-stress. Other folks lift weights. Other folks go play a sport. They go play basketball. They go. There's different ways of physically taking care of yourself that can also positively affect and help you deal with some of the stress you're going along with, or that you're dealing with, right? So psychological health includes emotional and mental, has profound impact on your physical, as we said, and chronically pessimistic, angry, anxious, or depressed have higher rates of heart disease and cancer. So we also see, I just said physically we can do positive things to help us with our negative mental status. But again, if you constantly have like high stress mentally, so emotion and mental, it can have profoundly bad results on your physical health as well. Okay, and again, with that, it's not a perfect direct relationship. There's a lot of components that happen within that, but it does happen. Right. The impact of stress. 22% of Americans report experiencing extreme stress. More adults report their stress is increasing than decreasing. Right. How many of you have thought, well, if I can get past this, things will get better? And you get past some tough, stressful times, but then in general, you look at it, you're like, man, this year's more stressful than others, right? I think we all have looked ahead to the future, and now we're in 2020, which is the most stressful year ever. Right? We keep thinking, oh, hopefully it's going to get better. I really do hope it does get better. But what if this is just the beginning of things getting worse? Who knows, right? And so, growing up, you always think, oh, once I get past high school, oh, once I get past college, oh, once I get through, working a few years at this entry level position, once I get through. But as you graduate from each chapter of your life, things typically grow in stress and in different ways. Okay. So more than 9 in 10 adults believe that stress can contribute to the development of major illness, and that some type of stress can trigger heart attacks, arrhythmias, and even sudden death. Right? Not only, one of the problems is if you believe that, you know, you can work yourself into a frenzy where your heart does go out of whack, and so on, you know, in a way. Okay. Now, again, you got to have some underlying health issues, but stress can contribute to those as well. The role of chronic stress in disease, Healthy People 2020 summarizes health goals for the U.S. Again, I don't think we're hitting the health goals in 2020 with the pandemic, but anyways, mental health problems are among the most pressing concerns in public health. And again, I think what we're going to see result from this year is mental health is going to be at an all-time high in a negative way. Right? There's so much concern over getting the virus. There's so much concern over being restricted in what you can do. There's so much concern over jobs. There's so much concern over what is normal going to be like after this. There's so much concern. That's a lot of stress for all of us, right? So you have folks that were dealing with a lot of stress coming into this year. This just added to it. You have folks that weren't dealing with much stress coming into it. Now they have a lot of stress. People that thought that they had very secure employment, and then the U.S. shuts down what they're doing because it's not deemed essential, right? And they've been shut down for several months. You know, you've been running your own business. There's so many crazy things going on right now. And this chapter really brings to light what stress can do to us. Now, again, I don't want to diminish what stress anybody's dealing with, because I believe everybody's dealing with a very high amount of stress right now. But how we handle this can have a profound impact on our physical health, and we're going to see that, okay? So there's direct and indirect effects of chronic stress. Like I said, it's very multifactorial in the way that it can produce illness, okay? So stress can affect health either directly by way of physiological changes in the body or indirectly through a change in a person's behavior, okay? So, direct. We release hormones by the endocrine system during alarm reaction stage, general adaptation syndrome. Again, you know, if you're constantly releasing certain stress hormones, they can have a profound impact on your health. Okay. Again, there's hormones that so you got to look at it two ways. One, you know, let's look at some outside of stress. Okay. So one of the ways that a person can become a type 2 diabetic is by their body not reacting to insulin. So their body is what we call insulin insensitive. Okay, they don't have good insulin sensitivity. Okay, a lot of times this has a high correlation with both genetics, and as you add excess body fat to the point that you become obese, and some other physiological things that can add to that. Okay, so your body becomes insulin insensitive or less insulin sensitive, however you want to look at it. So the body's constantly producing insulin because your body is not reacting to it, and so it's this constant overproduction of it to help regulate your blood sugar, which is not being regulated to the extent that a normal body would function and regulate. Okay, and again, this is different than type 1 diabetes, so don't get them mixed up. So you're producing. Eventually, a patient that has like pre-type 2 diabetes and then go into type 2 diabetes, they can be non-insulin dependent, but as their pancreas overproduces, they can therefore get to a point where the pancreas will not produce it anymore, and they can't produce it naturally, where now they have to get it from, you know, you got to take insulin just like a type 1 diabetic, right? So you have to have it either take shots or insulin pump. And you've gone from non-insulin dependent diabetic to insulin dependent diabetic. Okay. And so we see that happen in many routes. And the same thing with chronic stress. When you have chronic stress, you have these organs that are producing. Eventually the body gets to where it either becomes numb and it's having to overproduce, or the organs themselves get where they can't produce the same effect, right? And it goes hand in hand. Okay, so that's the direct. Indirectly, those who experience high levels of stress may respond with unhealthy behaviors. You may start drinking too much, doing drugs, not exercising, eating too much, whatever it is. There can be indirect effects of chronic stress as well. Okay. Allostatic load. This is your cumulative physiological wear and tear on the body that results from ongoing adaptive efforts to maintain homeostasis in response to stressors. Again, remember, your body's always wanting to maintain homeostasis. The same principle we talk about just in physiological terms as well. When we tell people your body wants to be comfortable, and that's why we tell people to exercise. Take it, and again, you know, you're like, well, wait, this is against what this chapter's saying. No, what this chapter is saying is chronic, right? So this is something where it's the stress just never relieves, right? So when you go to the gym or anything like that, you go for, you know, an hour, 90 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is. You stress your body physiologically for a short period of time. And then afterwards, your body works its way back to homeostasis. The next day you go do it again, works its way back. And again, your body adapts with this ebb and flow of physiological stress, then non-stress, physiological stress. That's good. But when it's constant, it has detrimental effects. Okay. And the wear and tear gets to a point in which the body just starts to break down. Okay, so hormones and other physiological factors that mediate the effects of stress on the body are protective and adaptive effects in short term. They can eventually start to accelerate disease processes in the long term if they don't get any reprieve. Okay, so the reason is not the race. Cultural connections. Health disparities exist between blacks and whites in the United States. Allostatic load can help explain the impact of discrimination and economics and emotional deprivation on health. Right. So again, it's not a, when you look at these, you know, some people may make the assumption that maybe we, you know, based on our race, there are major physiological differences. Not true. You know, from the standpoint of how our body, so you can take any race, and you know, let's go back to exercise, right? So you could take a white male, a black male, an Asian male, a Native American male. We take them all from being folks that don't work out. We put them in the gym. Over 6 months, they're lifting weights and doing things. We go to measure their strength. All of them should see strength gains. All of them should see muscle that was built. If they were in a caloric deficit, all of them should see fat percentage lost, right? Our bodies react differently, but culturally, if you're in certain cultural communities, and again, we can see this across the races too, those that are struggling to make ends meet, no matter what race you are going to have high levels of economic stress. Those that maybe are in a bad family situation, you know, you're in an abusive relationship, are going to see stress effects from that. And again, when you look at certain disparities, again, we look at the socioeconomic disparities. We look at, you know, like other things that, you know, that may be more of a higher prevalence in different races, also give a higher prevalence in health disparities as well, and mental health disparities, and so on and so forth. And so because of that, it's not your particular color of skin that causes this, but your socioeconomic status, along with other stresses that come along with being you as an individual, as well as, you know, things that are going on in your particular environment, and you know, like your neighborhoods, your workplaces, and all that, right? And again, now we're, you know, with everything going on right now, with the you know, the George Floyd and everything, you know, a lot of things are being brought to light. You know, some of these differences in how people are viewed, and how people have to deal with things differently, and so on and so forth, that you can see why you may see more stress in groups based on the fact of how, you know, they of how they're perceived or viewed, how they've had to deal with experiences, and so on and so forth. You know, and again, there's some really good conversations going on with that across all the races, and we're getting, you know, a lot of things that maybe people were not aware of, they're being more aware of. And so now you can see how the environments that we live in can cause this. And again, this is why that we might see higher percentages of certain health disparities amongst Black men and women, or amongst Hispanic or Latin men and women versus maybe white men and women. Again, growing up near a reservation, you know, we get a lot of the statistics on the Native Americans, which are usually a lot of times double or triple the amount, um, you know, compared to even what we see, you know, what we see in the national statistics. And again, they don't usually get reported because they're such a small group when you look across the United States. But, you know, when we're looking at some of the health disparities, it's just astronomical. And again, it's not a genetic issue as much as it is social, you know, social, economic, cultural, you know, all the things that play into their environments in those areas. And we see that this plays into these health disparities, and it also plays in the fact that there's a bigger need for health, you know, better health care, better health, you know, more people going into different areas and helping, you know, things like this, helping to learn to, you know, teach people to manage stress and work on those things, teaching people how to cope, you know, positively with stress versus negatively, right? So things like, you know, helping people to eat healthier and exercise versus maybe overeating when they're stressed, or you know, turning to smoking or drinking or drugs, or any of those types of things that sometimes people, you know, will pick, you know, as we looked in the last slide, people sometimes will pick negative versus positive, right? And again, going in and making sure people have resources, right? So again, in rural areas, having good places to, you know, like a lot of, you know, not only maybe a lot, but having places within a distance to go express yourself physically, like at a gym or something along those lines, may not be within, you know, within a reasonable driving distance or walking distance, or so on and so forth, right? And so we see these health disparities because of that. Effects of medium-term chronic stress: muscle tension and pain, headaches, fatigue, upset stomach, difficulty breathing, bruxism, cold or sore throat. Again, bruxism is like, you know, like cleansing the jaw, grinding teeth, things like that. You know, many of you might have some of these, maybe one of these, maybe all of these. You know, you've experienced these at different levels. Medium-term chronic stress on the immune system. Immune system is unable to work as effectively when you're stressed. Your body produces natural antibodies to counteract infection on days with positive events. The worse the day, the fewer the antibodies that are produced. Cortisol in particular lingers in the body and weakens the body's immune response. Again, cortisol is not a bad hormone. Some people get this weird thing about, like, you know, because you read stuff like this, you read that when cortisol is released, a lot, you know, there's some negative effects with it. There's also positive effects, but again, the right amount of cortisol released sporadically throughout a day at different times, it can have a positive effect. But again, if it's constantly in use, like we said, if your insulin is constantly in use, if your adrenal glands are constantly producing adrenaline or like there are some negative effects that happen with that. Okay, so again, it's your body is meant to produce and then not produce something for a while, let it rebuild, let other things, a lot of times when one hormone goes down, another hormone comes up, and this ebb and flow that happens with your different hormones is healthy for your body, right? And not hitting extremes very often is healthy for your body. But when things are elevated and stay elevated for long periods of time, it is not healthy for your body. Okay, so the cold hard facts. Common cold is not an equal opportunity attacker. Happy, relaxed people are more resistant to illness than those who tend to be unhappy or tense. Again, true and not true. Some folks may have just a more suppressed immune system or so on and so forth, so they could be happier and relaxed, and again, they may be more prone. Again, happy, relaxed folks that maybe who have any underlying health problems. Again, we see folks that who's like you haven't taken care of your body or whatever, or you're just genetically born with a suppressed immune system. Okay, take this with where they're going. Like if you're taking a general healthy person that is happier and relaxed, this holds more truth, right? Serious work-related or personal stress that lasts at least a month increases your chance of catching a cold. I can attest to any time I was in college, I tend to catch colds at the end of each semester. Why? Because again, I'd be stressed out for the last month of every semester because I'd have a lot of big projects due, got final exams, and I'm just working, constant mental stress going on. Again, a lot of times I was still working out through that to help try to mitigate, and not necessarily I worked out to mitigate stress. It's just something I always did. But the stress was just ongoing. Okay, my sleep patterns weren't good, so on and so forth. And I wouldn't typically catch a cold during finals. It was always right after. It was like right after when I'm like, okay, now I can relax. And I would be sick for like a week or two. Okay. Rates of respiratory infection, clinical colds increase in dose response manner with the extent of psychological stress. Stress and memory, stressful events that cause release of certain hormones can make you forget things you should know. Again, you guys ever had such a stressful day, like you forget to do like just normal, like you have your normal activities, like where you wake up, you go to the bathroom, you take a shower, you eat breakfast, and something just normal, like, man, I forgot to eat breakfast, or I forgot to pour my coffee, I forgot to do, something that's a normal, like you never forget. That can happen, right? And normal memory function returns when the levels of stress hormone return back to normal. Okay. Long-term chronic stress evidence suggests a relationship between risk of cardiovascular disease and environmental and psychosocial factors. Mental stress increases oxygen demand because blood pressure and heart rate are elevated, right? Again, your cardiovascular system is meant to be pushed. And then when you go from you go run or you go do whatever you do to push it, when you spend time resting and relaxing, that's the time, it's like everything else. Like when you go lift weights, you're doing like a little bit of damage to the muscles, pushing it, and so then the muscles learn to adapt and get stronger. So does your cardiovascular system. But again, if they stay under a constant load of stress, you can't rebuild while you're stressed. The rebuilding happens after. So if the stress never goes away, you can't strengthen the cardiovascular system. So mental stress will increase that oxygen demand, keep the blood pressure up, heart rate's constantly elevated, and it never gets any reprieve to work on strengthening itself. Stress in the heart, vascular resistance, and coronary artery constriction during mental stress decreases blood supply. Blood flow to the heart muscles decreases, blood tends to clot more easily, And chronically high levels of cortisol may affect cardiac health by promoting inflammation that causes heart attacks, right? So again, you get where you get blockages and you can't get oxygen to certain areas of the heart. Again, same thing can happen in the brain where you get a stroke. And again, this happens with chronically high levels of stress. Long-term stress in the immune system. Stress hinders the immune system's ability to produce and maintain lymphocytes and natural killer cells. Impaired immunity makes the body more susceptible to many diseases. Long-term stress, aging, and disease. Stress and aging. Prolonged stress can age people prematurely, shortens lifespans of cells, opens the door to infections. If you guys have ever looked at those first year pictures and last year pictures of presidents, especially those that have served the 8 years, so they've done the 2 terms, it's just astronomical how different they look. You know, even the presidents that only served 4 years. So, you know, if you look at, you know, going back to, you know, like if you want to go back to like maybe some like early pictures of I'm trying to think, you know, since we've been able to like take pictures of like the beginning and end of presidents, maybe like start with Lyndon B. Johnson, you know, and look at the beginning of his presidency to the end. You know, you look at you know, Ford, Carter, Nixon, you know, Reagan, Bush Sr., Clinton, Bush Jr., President Obama. Again, you know, if you look at maybe the beginning of, you know, Trump to whenever his last day in office, you'll notice the stress, you know, again, you're running the United States. It's a very high stress job. And the aging that happens, like those before and after pictures are, it's amazing, right? And again, you see this with people, you know, that are under high stress. You know, you may see a friend and then like several years later, you know, they have this high stress job. They're working all the time. You run into them, you're like, what happened, right? Stress and inflammation. Chronic inflammation plays a role in many diseases. High levels of stress can trigger a large number of other diseases and conditions as well. Okay, so again, inflammation is not the cause of something, but inflammation is always the result of something, which then also leads to more problems, right? Remember, inflammation is a response. Okay, so stress can cause inflammation, injuries can cause inflammation, so on and so forth. And again, inflammation is a good thing in the right context, in the right amount, but when it's chronic, it's a bad thing. Okay, so as you can see, a lot of this chronic stuff, you know, these are things that, you know, your body normally does, and they can be good things. There's a place, there's a place for those things, but when they're in chronic demand, it becomes a whole different issue and can cause more issues, which cause more issues. You know, it's kind of this rabbit hole that you just keep going down. Okay, stress and diabetes. Men who have reported permanent stress have a 45% higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes than men who reported no periodic stress, independent of other known risk factors. So again, is it that stress itself? No, but stress may lead to less exercise, which may lead to more eating. Stress may also lead to the fact that, again, what we talked about, your body becomes more resistant to insulin, right? And you're unable, your body's ability to use insulin when the body produces it and reduce your blood sugar becomes limited. Okay, and so it's this ongoing problem that we see, right? And again, it's very multifactorial. Some things are more direct than others. How the mind and body communicate. Psychosomatic illnesses, now termed psychosociological illnesses to avoid connotation that illness is somehow imagined. Experience plays a complex role in determining health. You know, sometimes you know, like you ever hear, you know, like sometimes people tell you like, you know, envision what you'd like to see in your life, and the more you envision it and you believe in it and things like that, things can come true. There's a little bit of that with like, you know, like when you psychologically feel run down, you know, you may not be sick at that moment, but that constant stress and grind will lead you down that path. Okay. Karoshi is a Japanese term that means death by overwork. Victims average over 80 hours of work per week. Many Japanese workers are finding options that help relieve the strain. Waiashi is a mixture of healing, calming, getting close to nature. And again, you'll see sometimes you'll see some cool films of some big corporations where, you know, even though they still work quite a bit, you know, they'll give them time where they build these beautiful gardens where they'll go and sit and you know, like they have these like kind of meditation times, or they'll go do, you know, like some physical exercise times and some other stuff that you may see coming out of Japan to combat the fact that they do work a lot, and they want to try to keep their employees healthy even though they're going to work quite a bit. Ingrained beliefs may make relaxation more difficult. Should a worker sacrifice personal well-being for the company? Obsession with work is often seen as a virtue in Japanese culture, and wariness a sign of weakness. You know, and again, it's not just their culture. You know, you see this in a lot of cultures. You know, you can look at this in sports culture sometimes. You know, you see guys, you know, and again with the death of Kobe Bryant this year, you know, people have really been coming out and talking about the man's work ethic, which was phenomenal. You know, we've got The Last Stand showing Michael Jordan, who had a work ethic that was phenomenal. And again, there's this like heroism that you see with these folks that, man, they just like, man, they had no quit in them. They worked and worked and worked. And if they weren't good enough, they worked and worked and worked hard. You know, it can be very ingrained that, man, if you want to succeed, you got to work for it, which there's truth in that. But there's the right mix of working and working hard, and also allowing the body to heal and allowing the mind to heal. And you've got to find that balance. Placebo effect, a phenomenon whereby an inactive substance or treatment is used to determine how the power of suggestion affects psychology, physiology, or biochemistry of experimental participants. So again, sometimes when we do experiments, you know, we may be doing like an experiment where people are getting some type of pre-workout, or they're getting creatine, or they're getting, you know, something that's supposed to enhance their performance, you know, in the gym or whatever else. Okay. So one group actually gets a subject, or they actually get the treatment, the other group gets the placebo. And a lot of experiments, what you'll see is you'll see an improvement in both groups. Now again, if you have a treatment that truly works, what you will see is the treatment group will see a much greater increase in strength, speed, whatever it is, versus the group that gets the placebo. But if you give people, you know, again, this is where we've seen, you know, folks that are like, oh yeah, I've got the best weight loss pill, blah, 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 blah. And really what it is when people are taking it, they work out harder, right? It has nothing to do with the fact that they're taking some type of herbal supplement theoretically helps you lose weight. And again, they'll give people the herbal supplement and a placebo, and the fact that everybody thinks that they're on something that's going to enhance their weight loss, they just work out more, and you'll see both groups actually decrease their weight at about the same level. Okay. And what that shows is the placebo effect, right? That people believe they're taking something that's helping, so they just do more because of it. Okay. The nocebo effect explains the causation of sickness and death by expectations of these negative outcomes by associated emotional states. So again, kind of the same thought process, but it's, you know, like it's a self-determining thing that you're doing things that are going to lead you down a negative path. What's Lapragus? Healthcare providers have long understood the impact of the placebo effect, and Lapragus, or Laprius, is it Lapragus or Laprius? May be prescribed. Sugar pill spelled backwards. Oh, so it is Lapragus. Apparently they didn't spell it right at the, I was like, wait a second. I thought it was, that there was a reason for that. So Lapragus is basically a prescribed placebo. right? And again, sugar pills are a typical placebo when it comes to drugs. Blaming the victim, the mentality that disease is the victim's fault is not a productive approach to health. Psychoneuroimmunology seeks to understand the complex communication between and among the nervous system, the psyche, the immune system, and their implications for health. Again, it's never good to cast blame. Anyways, it's good to again, in anything, really. So if you look at it this way, two people are in a emotional fight, physical fight, any type of fight, usually both are to blame to some extent. Okay. When you look at your body, like if you have stress or whatever else, I mean, you can point the finger at the stress, but that doesn't help you any, right? You've got to figure out how to cope with the stress physiologically, psychologically. Anything you look at, you can't just cast blame, but you've got to remediate, right? And blaming doesn't help. Okay. And again, it's the same way, it's the same way whether it's a relationship or whether it's a health issue. There's always multifactorial things going on. Psychoneuroimmunology finds acceptance as science adds evidence. So hormones and neurotransmitters released under stress can cause changes in your immune cell behavior. Cells have receptors to hear the signals, allowing nervous, endocrine, and immune system to so-called talk to each other, right? They all work together, they communicate, and they interact. So the body is affected by what the mind experiences. The mind is affected by what the body experiences, okay? So the mind can be a healer or a slayer. Same thing, the body, can be a healer or slayer, right? So again, sometimes you just can't get out of your head. Sometimes it's good to go do something physical that then clears, the physical component clears the mind. Same thing, the mind, sometimes you just got to use your mind to help heal the body, and again, there's extents to which we do that. I'm not saying that, if you have some major chronic disease, if you think it out of existence, it won't be there. But again, by thinking positive can also help somewhat physiologically, right? To the extent that plays into that point, okay? So again, think about health concerns that you or someone you know might be experiencing right now. In light of information in this chapter, think how stress may have contributed to the problem. Again, we're not going to do this lab, but if you guys decide to kind of do this as a mental exercise, remember the stress itself may have contributed. Understand that. We don't cast blame. We don't look at something like that was the end all be all, but how did it contribute? All right. How was it a factor? Okay. So think of it in those terms. Okay. Again, we're not doing these labs. I've been assigning you different labs that I think are a little bit more useful. So, all right. That's it for chapter 4. If you guys have questions, please email, text, write me on Blackboard and I will answer those. And I'm stopping recording now.